So this is an AI generated picture of when I put the description in of the wheat and the tares, and it wouldn't look anything like this, but it does give us an idea of what this parable is about. But for the purposes of this, what is really important is that what Jesus was talking about was the wheat and another thing which we would call in a colloquialism bastard wheat. They called it Darnell. It looked exactly like wheat right up until the week of harvest. And then all of a sudden, from looking exactly like wheat, it doesn't develop any of the grain at the end of the stalk, and it doesn't become this beautiful gold. It turns gray. But you don't know that until about the last 5 days. So the symbology that Jesus is emphasizing is that whether we are looking at our community in the world, you look around and you see people that are doing the same thing you're trying to do, right? They are hoping to get married. They're hoping to have families. They're hoping to have a career and be able to sustain themselves. And everyone looks like they're all moving in the same direction. But at some point, you find out that there are vast differences. And Jesus is saying the same thing happens in the church. Like when we had the previous parable about the 10 bridesmaids. All those girls were about the same age. They were all Jewish. They were all in the same kind of wedding regalia. They all had torches. They were all excited because their friend was getting married. And if you looked at them moving through the village on their way to the wedding dinner, they all look the same. They look almost uniform. And then you find out that half of them brought reservoirs of oil with them, flasks of oil, and the other half didn't. And it ended up costing half of them their admission to the wedding dinner, which is getting into heaven. And the same thing is here. Everything looks the same, but it's not the same. And this is Jesus continuing to bang this drum. And that is that he's there now. And this is the first time that he came. And it was foretold, right, in the Old Testament, over and over again, explanation of who the Messiah will be and where he'll be born and what lineage he's from, and what things would happen to him and how he would die and what would happen after he died. All of that kind of thing was all foretold, all written in by the prophets, all studied by all the priests, and everybody missed it. Everybody missed it. And now he's saying, look, I'm going to be leaving, and the next time I come, there's no second chances. You either get it right or you get it wrong. And so in this case, he's saying, we're going to let the darnel and the wheat grow together. And then in the last few days before harvest, we'll pull all the darnel, bundle it, and burn it. Okay? You can figure out who that means. So let's go. Let's get into the writing here. And the initial writing is Isaiah. All right. So the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled. It says, and in them, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, so he's talking about all these people who just don't understand what he's talking about when he tells these parables. So he says, Isaiah says, 700 years before Jesus' time, hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull, their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn so that I should heal them. in the King James Version, they shall turn again and be converted. So, in other words, he's saying 700 years before this time, he's predicting that the people in Jesus' time are going to have hardened hearts. Okay, in the King James Version, it says, these people's hearts have waxed gross, just meaning that they don't understand anything that they hear. And it's not just the hardness of heart, because the disciples don't have hardness of heart and they don't understand anything. So this is what we're seeing, is this prophecy is foretold, and then it's exactly the thing that's happening, because Jesus is acting in full accord with the ancient prophecies written about him. So for us, by comparison, Isaiah foretelling this 700 years before would be like us hearing stories about Trump in the year 1325, a time when Robert the Bruce is king of the Scots and the Scots are at war with England, and somebody's talking about a guy named Trump who is going to be shot and will survive that and hopefully give the United States a second chance. It's that out of context. So let's continue. Jesus gave them another parable to consider, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds, resembling wheat, Darnell, among the wheat, and went away. So when the plants sprouted and formed grain, the weeds appeared also. The servants of the owner came to him and said, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? Then how does it have weeds in it? So the one who sows the good seed is Jesus. This is the symbology here. And the one who sows the darnels is Satan. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the fact that whether it's in our church, in our families, wherever, Satan is constantly sowing discord? And if we stop and try to root it out, we do more destruction than the remedy that God recommends, which is we let these two things grow together and then we separate them at maturity. So, this issue of sowing weeds into somebody's crop was something that happened quite a lot back in the time of Jesus. So much so that the Romans had specific laws to deal with it and specific punishments. Because if you could destroy a man's harvest by having all of these weeds in with the crop, you might have a shot at being able to buy his land more cheaply if he couldn't come up with the money to continue to operate. So it was a particularly nasty agrarian crime that we wouldn't know about, but the Romans were trying to deal with it because it was that frequent. So the field in this case is the world, and the children of the kingdom are the church in the world. So now we have all this symbology of, it says in verse 25, but while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds. So the inference there is, especially in the church, that when men are asleep, when leadership is asleep in the church, then that's when things can go awry. And we have to constantly be on our guard, because this is Satan's playground. And he is constantly sowing evil. So when the plants sprout, well, now it's too late. Okay. Now they're in the mix. And I think to a certain extent, what we have faced as a nation, okay, and coming up to this election in 2024, many of us believed if we lose this election, then we lose our republic. That's it. And so people were praying in groups and praying relentlessly and praying hard that God would give us a chance. And he did give us a chance, but it's a chance that requires a lot of work. And it resembles this parable because 20 million people were let into our country so that we could never have a fair and honest election again. And God granted us a conservative government to try to right all of this wrong. But he did not say, I'm going to remove all of these people for you. He's saying, you know what? All of this happened because we got too passive. We got too preoccupied with other things, with second things first, as opposed to first things first, which is our relationship to Jesus Christ, our making sure that our salvation is secure, and then second things first. But for too long, it was second things first. And that's what allowed all of this to happen. So when that happens, enough, God says, I'm going to give you a chance, but you're going to have to work this, and you're going to have to work it hard. What I'm seeing in the parable is that God is saying, listen, I'm going to help you, but you're going to really have to work this. And you're all going to have to work together to try to change all of the evil that has taken place and is now rooted like these weeds all through. What have we been hearing for the past, I'm going to say 10 days, right? Has been nothing but Epstein, right? The electorate is absolutely outraged that it looks like what we're being told is, yeah, all those things that we said we were going to do and find out and share with you, well, none of them happened. So just forget about it. And nobody's forgetting about it. And so as a result, that was a poor choice on the part of Trump. And he's done, I would say, what contemporary historians are saying is there's been no president in the history of the country who has had a 6 months like this man has. He should have numbers that are through the roof. But because of the position he took on Epstein, all those numbers were trashed. And his numbers are now low where they should be higher than Obama's. They are now lower than Biden's. Okay? That's bad. And that's the electorate saying, no, you can't do that to us. You cannot tell us that we're going to live in a country again where we have a two-tiered justice system. That is unacceptable. And you're going to have to solve this to our satisfaction, or you're going to get routed in November of 26, and then the Democrats are just going to impeach you, and that's going to be it. The whole thing will have failed because you decided that you didn't want to share the truth with the people who worked tirelessly to get you elected. There's no other way around that. And so everybody gets to learn. Everybody's got their own individual curriculum, including Trump. Okay? And if God saves you, and this is by Trump's own words, he believes God saved him from a bullet to the head, from having his brain exploded on live TV. Okay? Because he did 5 or 6 things that he would normally never do. And he ends up only getting shot in the ear. And so if God is really working with you like that, and then you decide, yeah, but I'm the deal master, and I think I can do better for the country by wheeling and dealing with this Epstein portfolio and making people do what I need them to do so that we can have progress and move ahead. I understand the human thinking, but what does the Bible say about that? It says God's wisdom is foolishness to man, and man's wisdom is foolishness to God. So when Trump is trying to explain to God, if he ever explains to God, you know what? There's a lot of bad people, and I have to navigate all this, and the electorate's just going to have to deal with the way I'm going about this. And I don't have to get elected again. So I'll try to be polite, but ultimately my elbows are going to be flying. And so he's been reversing positions. And I don't think that's going to work because I don't see that as being how God works anywhere in the history of the Bible. And throughout the history of the Bible, God is completely involved in the affairs of men, whether they're the greatest kings running the greatest kingdoms in the world or this situation that we're looking at right now. So we need to be praying about these things. And Jesus is saying to his people, look, this is what happens in this world. Satan is constantly trying to add his sinful desire to the good things that we're trying to have come about. And so here's this man represented by Jesus who has sown a field and the devil has come, or in the words of the parable, an enemy has come and sowed tares, darnels in the field while his men were asleep. They weren't doing anything wrong. They worked hard and they were sleeping at night. And at that time, that's when somebody came and did this. Okay. But nonetheless, we have to be watchful. So you have to figure out a creative way of doing that. So now, when the plant sprouted and formed grain, the weeds appear also. The servants of the owner came and said, hey, did you not sow good seed in your field? Then how does it have weeds in it? And he replied to them, an enemy has done this. And the servants asked him, then do you want us to go and pull them out? But he said, no, because as you pull out the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. So this was a problem with the Catholic Church early on. They took this literally. And when someone would say, that person in our congregation is behaving badly or doing something sinfully, they would say, let's pull them up now and let's burn them, right? And Jesus is saying here, no, we're not going to operate that way. Because when you do that, it's too much destruction. So he says, let them grow together until the harvest. And at the harvest time, I will tell the reapers. Okay, so in the words of the parable, there'll be people coming to do the reaping. And he'll say, gather the darnels first, tie them up in bundles to be burned, and put the wheat in the barn. The symbology is that his angels are the reapers, and they are going to come and separate the sheep from the goats. And he's going to say, all right, this is it. This is what I kept warning everyone about. Now we're going to separate these two. And one group is going to fire, and the other group is going to the kingdom of heaven. So his wisdom is you let them grow together, whether it's in your church, whether it's in your community. The job is not to shock and awe everything to try to clean it up on the front end. Okay? Then he left the crowds. So that whole parable was told to a huge multitude. And then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples came to him saying, explain clearly to us the parable of the weeds in the field, because they didn't get it at all. And he answered, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Now, I just want to stop on that phrase, the Son of Man, because this is something important to note. Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man more that way than any other way in the Bible. And the Son of Man is a prophecy from Daniel, 605 years before Jesus is even born. He says that this Messiah will come as the Son of Man. And so Jesus constantly refers to himself as the Son of Man because the priests in the temple were constantly asking him if he was the Son of God. And his responses would be, the Son of Man knows this or knows that. The Son of Man comes into this world. All of that because it burned them, because they knew that it was Daniel's prophecy of the Messiah that was responsible for this term, the Son of Man. So here we have it. The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world. And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. Okay? So these are the folks who are in the church, who have accepted Christ, who are on their way to a full salvation. And the weeds are the sons of the evil one. But the way he's called this out, darnels and wheat, you can't tell the difference until the very end. So that means in your church, Satan has sown the sons of evil, but they don't look any different from the other people. And you have to wait, and you have to watch, and you have to pay attention, and you have to pray for them. And all of this is a long game, right? It's not a short game. It says, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the age. All right. So the symbol of this harvest is you won't know until the end of the age who is going to be bundled and burned and who is going to make it into the kingdom of heaven. And the reapers who are going to do this are the angels. So verse 40, so just as the weeds are gathered up and burned in the fire, so will it be at the end of the age. So this whole period of time when he is teaching with the parables, he is trying to soften what is dire storytelling, because he's saying, look, the first time I came, there was all kinds of prophecy, and you're going to have another chance even after I'm gone. But when I return, then that's it. Then it's a totally different deal. Then there's no more chances. If you've made the wrong choices, you get bundled and burned, and that's it. So we don't accept that kind of thing well. Okay, we look and say, well, wait a minute, before there were disciples, there was all kinds of opportunity to learn, and there was baptism and all of these things that kind of gradually brought us along. And he goes, yes, I agree with you completely. And that was so you could arrive at this point without excuse. And that's what all these parables say. You're coming to this point without excuse. And so these parables, they're fascinating to look at the history and the time and what it's like to dissect an agrarian culture and pull these things apart. That's all great. But the bottom line is you're in or you're out. And Christians, my gosh, so many of them do not believe. That's the finite ending of all of this. And it is. And because that's not politically correct and because it doesn't seem compassionate, most of the church doesn't embrace this. So the revivals didn't happen based on soft, cushy metaphors. They came from the truth of the word being told. And when they happened, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people came to Christ. All right. I think that covers the parable of the weeds. Let's go to the parable of the hidden treasure. So this is literally a one sentence parable. And the context here is now Jesus has brought the disciples into the house and he's explaining to them what the significance of the previous parable is. And then he tries to emphasize it with this parable of the hidden treasure. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like a very precious treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid again. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all he has and buys that field, securing the treasure for himself. Now, there's nothing that makes sense to us about what is going on here. Okay. First of all, this man probably was working this field as a laborer, and he finds a treasure as he's digging and doing whatever the planting or loosening up the soil, whatever the labor is, he's run into some kind of container with probably gold or something like that in it. Now, that was not unusual back in that time because there was the beginning of a banking industry, but it was really corrupt and it was really just for the wealthy. And because of that, it was tremendously corrupt. And somebody who was a laborer would just lose whatever he gave to a bank. And there were constantly skirmishes between villages, and they were getting attacked, and then they would sack all the houses. And so it wasn't safe to leave your valuables in your house. The only thing safe was to go out, make sure nobody was seeing you, find a remote place that you could dig a hole and bury it in, and then you were the only one who knew about it. So, of course, that doesn't always work out great, right? And some people, things happen to them, and then nobody knows where their treasure is, and then it's lost. So, this laborer found this in somebody else's field. And because this happened so often, the rabbinic law of that time was if you find fruit, if you find money, it's yours. Okay. Our law would say, hey, wait a minute. You're working for me in my field and you find a treasure in my field. That means that treasure is mine. Not back in this day. If he found it, it's his. So now what does it say? It says the kingdom of heaven is like a very precious treasure hidden in a field. So here's the interesting thing. This guy wasn't looking for this treasure. He was just doing his work and he stumbles on it. He says, which a man found and hid again, right? So he doesn't know if somebody else knows where that was, but he obviously moved it and buried it again in that field. Okay. And then in his joy, he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field, securing the treasure for himself. So now these parables break down if we scrutinize them too much, but in terms of, well, wait a minute. He could have just taken the gold and then gone and bought the field and then accomplished the same thing. It's not what Jesus is trying to teach. What he's trying to say is that This thing that he found, he wasn't even looking for. And when he found it, he was so overjoyed, right? Which is the way we're supposed to react to attaining salvation, something we could never earn, something we could never pay for. It is a gift given to us by grace. And we should be prepared to do whatever it takes to keep that secure. And so Jesus is saying, this guy stumbled on this. He wasn't looking for it. He knew nothing about it. He found it, he hid it, and then he went and he sold everything that he owned so that he could secure this because it was the most important thing in his life. And so that's the point he's trying to make to the disciples, is that this gift of salvation, which they don't even know anything about it, how they're going to receive it, the agonizing death that is going to be his payment for all of our sins so that we can receive that, they don't understand at all. And so this short one sentence parable is him trying to say, look, this is how it comes about. You have no idea what this is, but it is going to be given to you by the grace of God. And when you find it, you must do everything in your life to secure it and to understand that it is the most important thing in your life, because your life, we talk about the rope talk, right? There's 1 inch of red rope and then the rest of the rope. Okay, the rest of the rope is eternity. So whatever it takes in your life, that's no sacrifice at all compared to the eternity that you will spend with God or not. And if you think of the story of the rich young ruler, he had everything. And he says to Jesus, what can I do to make sure that I will have salvation and be in heaven? And Jesus said, well, are you keeping the 2 main commandments? And he goes, oh, I've kept those perfectly from the time I was young. Well, nobody does that. Okay. Nobody can do that. And so Jesus says, that's good, but there's one thing you haven't done. You should take all of this wealth that you have and all your social prestige, and you should sell it and give it to the poor, and then follow me. And then you'll never have to worry about your salvation again. And he didn't prize his salvation. He would not give up his worldly wealth. And so Jesus is making this point to the disciples because they're in this culture where wealth is equated to God having favor with you. And he's trying to break that hold on them and to say that is absolutely not the truth. There is no truth in that. And so whatever it takes for you to attain the kingdom of heaven should be the most important thing in your life, no matter what the cost. And that's the substance of this 1 sentence parable, the hidden treasure. All right, then we are going to have some reinforcement regarding George Washington. I'm going to mute everybody again so we can get through his prayer from his prayer journal. We haven't had one in a while, so here we go. O most glorious God, in Jesus Christ, my merciful and loving Father. I just have to stop there because the historians constantly are reconfiguring who these founders were and that they were just this awful racist patriarchy and deists and not really Christians, and they'd be embarrassed by evangelicalism or whatever represents contemporary faith these days. And listen to the opening line from the founder of our country. O most glorious God, in Jesus Christ, my merciful and loving Father, I acknowledge and confess my guilt. in the weak and imperfect performance of the duties of this day. I have called on thee for pardon and forgiveness of sins, but so coldly and carelessly that my prayers are become my sin and stand in need of pardon. I have heard the holy word, but with such deadness of spirit that I have been an unprofitable and forgetful hearer, so that, O Lord, though I have done thy work, yet it hath been so negligently that I may rather expect a curse than a blessing from thee. But, O God, who art rich in mercy and plenteous in redemption, mark not, I beseech thee, what I have done amiss. Remember that I am but dust, and remit my transgressions, negligences, and ignorances, and cover them all with the absolute obedience of thy dear Son, that those sacrifices which I have offered may be accepted by thee in and for the sacrifice of Jesus Christ offered upon the cross for me. For his sake, ease me of the burden of my sins, and give me grace that by the call of the gospel I may rise from the slumber of sin into the newness of life. Let me live according to those holy rules which thou hast this day prescribed in thy holy word. Make me to know what is acceptable in thy holy word. Make me to know what is acceptable in thy sight, and therein to delight. Open the eyes of my understanding, and help me thoroughly to examine myself concerning my knowledge, faith, and repentance. Increase my faith and direct me to the true object, Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. Bless, O Lord, all the people of this land, from the highest to the lowest, particularly those whom thou hast appointed to rule over us in church and state. Continue thy goodness to me this night. These weak petitions I humbly implore thee to hear, accept, and answer for the sake of thy dear Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.